morning, Fabrication friends. Welcome back to Fabrication 101. We are back in the garage working on the Bronco some more. Today I got to tackle a project that I've been kind of putting off because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with it. I think I've got a pretty good plan now, so we're going to go ahead and try and tackle this project. What I'm working on here is these fenders on the Bronco here. I want to create some sort of a tube style, not just a fender, but more like a fender flare. You can see I've already cleaned all this up. I cleaned up the ugly cuts from the previous person who was actually me. Built a mount here for the fender to mount onto that I think is going to be nice and solid because it actually welds to the cage on the inside, and then we'll have some bolt holes here in the fender as well. What am I going to use for this? Well, that's what that big piece of 2x3 or 1x3 rectangle tube is for. I want to give it a bend here around that will follow a nice radius there. I'm actually going to try and do a piece of round tube outside of this, give an edge to the fender. My tubing fender, with its 1-inch die, has a 6-inch diameter die, so a 3-inch radius. So I want to try and match that 3-inch radius in that tube. So how am I going to do that with pie cuts? What are pie cuts, you ask? Well, let's go over to the whiteboard and let's see if I can explain it without getting things too complicated. Oh, sorry about that. So pie cuts are a good way to bend radius, put a bend in any kind of tubing, whether it be round or square tubing. If you don't have a way to bend it. And one other benefit is if you're using it for intake tubing, it does not change the inside radius of the material or the inside dimensions of the material, so you can keep a nice smooth airflow. For what I'm doing, it's going to be a little different than just straight pie cuts or miter cuts. I guess it depends on what you're doing with them. Normally, on a pie cut piece of tube, you have a pie wedge, and a lot of people like to use kind of a standard dimension for these cuts. On the side, they'll either do 9 degrees or 18 degrees for this whole angled shape, and what that does is it gives you kind of standard number of cuts to make a certain type of bend. You know, with 9 degrees, or you only need 10 of them to go for a 90-degree bend. For 18 degrees, you need 5s because it's half as many. So it's kind of standard 9 and 18 degrees. What I'm doing is not really standard, so I have to do mine a little differently. Let's say I have this piece of tubing. It's 1 inch across. I'm going to draw it nice and big. And I want to try and match my bend radius, so I need to know how many cuts to make over the length of the arc. And to get your arc length, it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty easy. You just take the number of, like I want to go, my bend is 60 degrees, so I divide 60 degrees by 360, and then I multiply that times the circumference, and that tells me how long that arc length needs to be. I also need to figure out the number of cuts I want to make. I want to have this be nice and smooth. So I'm looking at like 12 cuts of about 5 degrees to do mine. Now the problem I have is this is what a 5-degree cut's going to look like, how mine are going to come out in my tube, with about a 1/4 of an inch space in between there. Now the problem, if you think about this, is 1 minute on a clock is 6 degrees, and so my 5 degrees across a 1-inch piece of material is not a very big opening. It's not anywhere near like this. My opening is actually about 3/16 of an inch. I just drew that wrong. 3/16. That's what I wanted to make that cut. So it's really not much of a pie cut. It's more like just a slice into the tube. every 1/4 inch or so, and that should give me my bend radius the way I want. Should look pretty good. Once it's rolled and or bent, we'll go ahead and weld it up, smooth it down, and it should look, I think, pretty decent. We'll see. I guess we'll have to go find out. So it's all marked out there. So the next question is, how am I going to cut this? I kind of misspoke a little bit earlier when I said my cut width was 3/16. It's actually more like 332, which is a lot less. It's just a little bit more than a 16. So I'm going to go ahead and use a cutoff wheel. This particular cutoff wheel is a 1/16 of an inch, so it should get me pretty close on my first shot. I think what I'll probably have to do is open the cuts up just a little bit. Okay, let's see how that bends here. Get you guys out of the way. So, pretty close. I'm not quite sure that's my 60 degrees. I'll have to measure it to check it, but let's find out. Alright, so I've got my nifty little digital bevel gauge. So we'll put it on here, slide it on. Let's see, we'll pull it till it's tight, and looks pretty dang close. We're right at, and we can actually go a little bit past 60 if we pull hard on it, so that's good. I think it'll work. So before we get it welded, I wanted to double check and make sure that it does match my tube. Now this is just a piece of scrap 1-inch round tube that I had laying around, and if I pull it tight, it actually matches really, really closely. Now this is a 90-degree bend, so it's not gonna line up perfectly, but I think that's pretty good. fits on the Bronco. Let's see what it does. Fits pretty good. Let's see. So you can see there's a pretty good curve to the body. I think my plan is to go ahead and notch this out to fit that, and then I'll put a piece of 1 inch, or not 1 inch, 3/4 flat strap on an 1/8 inch thick on the inside of that, just to close it all up. It should look pretty good. So I guess I'll make a cardboard pattern of that curve and see if we can figure out how to make that fit. Too bad. It's pushing out just a little bit at the bottom. So I'm going to take that down just a hair more. Top looks good. When I push it tight in all the way into the angle iron in there, it actually fits pretty nice up here. Not overly too worried about that gap back there. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. Plus, when I bolt it in there, there's going to be bolts going into the back of this to hold it nice and tight. So it fits pretty good. I think I'm going to grind that just a hair more. We'll call that good. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make the little piece that's going to come across here. I am going to square this off with the bottom of the body. I think I'm going to try and do those rock sliders that I was talking about in the last video, or one of the last videos, and I don't know yet, I may try to attach these to the rock sliders just for a little bit more added strength to these, not necessarily for the rock sliders. So we'll mark this off, and we'll make a little cardboard template so we can cut that piece out, and then we'll put a piece of 1/8 inch strap on the inside so that we have a place to mount our bolts. We're going to use 5/16 nut-certs on the inside of the fender tube to attach it to the body. So. Tacked in. Looks pretty good. I need to be really careful when I weld this. There is a very, very good chance that as I weld all this, it's going to pull and it's going to put a big bow in this piece of material, which is not what I want. So that's why I did these short stitch welds. So I'll do them a little bit at a time, kind of jump around, hopefully to spread the heat out. Hopefully it won't bow too much. That's all welded up. I didn't film most of that just because I took a lot of time between runs because I didn't want it to warp any worse than it's probably going to anyway. As you can see, I clamped a chunk of aluminum here to act as kind of like a heat sink. Hopefully that sucked some of the heat out. I also tried to space out. You can see the heat affected zone's fairly minimal. Hopefully that, well, down here it really doesn't matter, so hopefully that will keep it from warping too bad. I'm going to go ahead and leave it clamped in here as it cools. And so that's going to be the end of this video for today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and checking things out and watching along. Hopefully you guys are enjoying what's going on here. I would ask that you guys give me a like and subscribe, maybe send a comment my way down below. In the meantime, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, and get out there and build something.